You're listening to Psych with Mike. For more episodes or to connect with the show with comments, ideas, or to be a guest, go to www.psychwithmike.com. Follow the show on Twitter @PsychWithMike or like the Facebook page @PsychWithMike. Now, here's Psych with Mike.
Hello and welcome into the Psych with Mike Library. I am your host, Dr. Michael Mahan, and if you follow the show, then you know that my very dear friend and co-host of the show since the very beginning, Mr. Brett Newcomb, recently retired. And so as I am thinking about where I want the show to go, what I want it to look like, as we retool it, we're revisiting some of the things that Brett and I did together. And today we're looking back at the show that was downloaded and has been listened to the most in the history of Psych with Mike. And to be honest, it's not even close. One of the things that always surprises me in therapy is that I can go off on a caffeine-fueled diatribe and just be dropping pearls of wisdom that I think are transcendent and absolutely changing the life of a client. And inevitably, they'll come in some months later and say, hey, you know, that thing that you said to me, it was just so important and so powerful. And I'll be like, yeah, I know, man, I was really on fire that day. And then what they'll report to me is something completely different than what I thought was important. And that's the way with this show today. So we're looking back on a show that we did on the 5th of February, 2021 on transactional analysis. So when I go back and I look at the numbers for the show, the highest rated shows are the ones that are about a particular theory. And so when I come back and start doing new shows, I think that I will at least start off focusing on that and doing some breakdown, deconstruction of some of the more famous and more influential theories in psychology. But as always, I definitely want to hear from people who watch the show and maybe even use the show, maybe even think of the show as something as an adjunct, because again, this can't be a substitute for psychotherapy, but hopefully an adjunct to either your education in psychotherapy or your participation in psychotherapy. So I definitely want to hear from people who pay attention to the show and give me some feedback on what you want the show to look like. And again, if anybody ever wants to participate in the show on a part-time or even regular basis, please reach out to me. I am always interested in fielding those options. So without further ado, this is the February 5th Psych with Mike on transactional analysis. The music that appears in Psych with Mike is written and performed by Mr. Benjamin DeClue. And as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike. Welcome into the Psych with Mike Library. This is Dr. Michael Mahan, and I'm here with my good friend and colleague, Mr. Brett Newcomb.
Hey, it's good to be back.
Yeah, you were just saying that you're a good guy.
I am.
Yeah.
At least I believe I am.
Well, do you have to say that out loud, make it manifest in the world because there's some question about it, or?
No. Nope, I just say it because it feels good. Mm-hmm. It's the reason I do so many things.
Because it feels good?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was going to make a comment, but I'm going to not.
Does that feel good?
It feels smart.
If you honor your better self? Yeah.
It feels smart.
Oh, good.
So have you been?
I've been great.
Yeah. People would not know this. There'd be no reason for them to know this, but we just enjoyed lunch. So we're actually podcasting now on full stomachs.
Postprandial.
Yeah.
Some would say.
Well, do you know, and you probably know this because I probably told you this before, you have more serotonin receptors in your gut than you do in your brain.
Yeah, as long as you don't eat too much pasta. That'll put you right to sleep.
Well, but so that's because you have these serotonin receptors in your gut. That's why people can eat emotionally, because it actually does cause.
So do you find that when you say things like that to people,
Mm-hmm.
are they just like stunned at your brilliance, or are they kind of like, ho hum?
Well, let me ask you, when I say things like that, are you stunned by my brilliance, or are you ho-hum?
I fall somewhere in between.
Uh-huh.
I don't know that I've ever been to one of those extremes.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty much the reaction that I'm used to getting. But I'm stunned by my brilliance.
Well, good for you.
So I guess that's all that matters.
Well, yeah, there's been a lot of therapy that helps us get to that place.
Then some people
That's
would
all
say
that
that I shouldn't be so egocentric.
Some people would say that your self-esteem is overrated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there is
But
that.
they're just killjoys. They don't know.
Yeah, well, I just think that someday the course of
The wheel will
events
turn. Yeah.
will prove me right, and people will say, we should have listened to Mike all along.
So it's all about being right.
Unfortunately, that is my worldview.
Orienting philosophy.
And I was actually thinking about this yesterday when I was working out.
Is it about being right or being perceived as being right?
Probably being perceived.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. Now, I would say that those are the same things, but I recognize they're not.
Then why would you say it?
Well, because I would say that, well, of course, I think that I am right.
I think, therefore I am.
And then,
Cognito ergo sum.
but I'm also smart enough to realize that I may not be right.
Well, you have
so
a wife.
then I'd rather
you have a wife that helps you realize
perceived
that
as
on a
right,
regular
yeah.
basis.
Yeah. But I was actually thinking about this yesterday when I was working out. There's this old phrase that if you have a choice between being right and being kind, choose kind.
So you were thinking about that while you were working out.
Yeah,
When I'm working out, I'm usually thinking 5 more minutes, 6 more minutes.
No, I was thinking about, and so I have been actually trying to apply that more consistently in my life. That being right is not the be all and end all of my existence, even though because of the way that I was raised. So here's the thing. We were both raised in what I think we would each describe as dysfunctional households.
In our kinder phraseology, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. After we've been drinking, we might say other things.
We might say other things.
But so for me, when I was little, I came to some conclusion, for whatever reason, that if I were right, that would serve some protectionistic function. Like if I'm right, then I'm going to be okay.
I think that's a fairly common human frame of reference.
Sure.
But I'm reminded of the opening song for The Music Man, where they're singing about, does anybody know Professor Harold Hill? Mm-hmm. Cash for the merchandise, and he doesn't sell on credit. Mm-hmm. They don't sell on credit, but Harold Hill does. Mm-hmm. And their standard complaint is, but he doesn't know the territory. He can't possibly sell in Iowa if he sells on credit, because nobody in Iowa ever uses credit. So I mean, it's a very nice, catchy song. Mm-hmm. It sounds like a train starting up and everything. But I don't know exactly why I got into this, but it has to do with the perception that a thing has to be the way you want it to be. Mm-hmm. It has to be that way because you want it to be that way. Yeah. And then we come back to your question about, well, is it right or is it kind? Which is better to be? I think I would go with kind. Mm-hmm. I think right is overrated because often we don't know what is right.
Well, there's no question that being kind is better. I mean, I accept that as an axiom.
I'm sorry, I thought that you were like
no. I'm not
of a dilemma.
Yeah, I'm not on. No. I believe that I just sometimes have difficulty allowing myself to remember to be kind. If I'm right, then I want to be right, and I want to push that agenda until everybody else agrees that I'm right.
So does your sense of moral virtue, your sense of rightness, come from your id, your ego, or your superego?
I'm bending over to get my pen.
Well, what's the right thing to do here is just continue the conversation.
It was the right thing to do, but I can't talk without my pen.
Here I have a spare. You can have one of mine.
So, I would say that the need to be that being right comes from the ego. The need to prove yourself right, I think, comes from the id.
Okay. So if we were talking in different terminology, if we were using Eric Berne's concepts of the adult, parent, and child.
What a great segue.
I keep telling you I'm a professional. Which of those domains, adult, parent, or child, where would reside the sense of rightness?
So Eric Berne relabeled Freud's terms id, ego, superego,
Right.
to child, parent, adult, or
Right.
child, adult, parent.
Right.
And so I would say that that being right is in the adult, but the need to prove yourself right is in the child.
And where's the parent?
Well, the parent, I don't know if they're, I guess the parent would be the recorded
The
underlying
parent would
message.
be the enforcer of right.
Yeah,
Yeah. The provider of rightness until you internalize it.
I hear an airplane.
Yeah. I think you're right.
So I think the parent would be the message that if you don't prove yourself right, then you're bad, would be the parental message. So you actually were the first person that introduced me to transactional analysis. Did you know that? Did you?
I did not know that.
Okay. So I went to graduate school at a place called Webster University in Webster Groves in St. Louis, Missouri. You were an instructor there. I don't think a lot of people were talking about transactional analysis. This was back in the 90s. I don't think a lot of people...
I'm really old, Michael.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I was in school. So I don't think that a lot of people there were teaching that. You actually were teaching this in the group class. So we had to take a class on how to do group therapy. And that's where you were teaching this, because Berne's original theories were based on the idea of communication. So they were about how we play games
Right.
with each other by the way that we communicate.
Yeah.
And so there were several books that he wrote that had to do with different games that you will see people play through their communication styles to try and get their agendas met.
Right. So he, as did Freud, had multiple theoretical frames that he would use to try to explain his point of view for why people behave the way they behave. And one of his frames was called Games People Play. And if you have a copy of the book's out of print right now, but you can still get them. They're available in old bookstores and online. But the first half of the book is a treatise, an explanation of the theory. And the second half of the book is then a list of maybe 150 specific games that Berne has identified that people play. Mm-hmm. And in the theory section, he says, people relate to one another through the use of games as a way to avoid recognizing the absence of intimacy or risking intimacy. So we play games, and he said that game players recognize each other. When two gamers meet, they signal each other, and they say, well, you want to play this game? And they don't identify it by name, although many of the ones in the book have names. You're like, I got you now, you SOB. Mm-hmm. Do you want to play that game? And if I'm a game player, I'll say, no, I don't want to play that game. How about if we play this game? And I'll listen to another one. And then you'll say, no, I don't want to play that one. How about if we play this one? And we just go back and forth like that until we realize we're not going to get to play unless one of us says okay. Mm-hmm. But by definition, the one that says okay is agreeing to lose. Mm-hmm. The winner, and he divides it, he calls it white and black, but the initiator is always the winner. Mm-hmm. So, but people play, and they agree to play even if they're going to lose because of the impact of the game, the effect of the game. It makes them feel as if they have some level of intimacy, but without the real risk of any intimacy. And so they agree to play and they agree to lose because they know that next time it'll be your turn to agree to play. And so we have a set of games or dances that we dance with each other in our relationship, none of which involves us having any accurate intimacy. But we play because it allows us to be together and be friends or care about one another, whatever descriptor you want to use. So the purpose of teaching that in a graduate class in counseling is to say, if you accept this concept, it will explain to you an awful lot of what's going on in the room when you do therapy, when you have a group of people, if you have a family group or if you have a group of common denominators, these people are all depressed or these people are all suicidal. They will interact with each other using game theory, and you can see the moves, and you can determine the winner and the loser based on who opens the dance and who says, okay, I'll dance with you. And then the underlying premise being, at some point in therapy, you have an opportunity to say, what if you didn't play games? What if you found a way to have intimacy in your relationship that didn't require the counter move of a chess game? And people resist hearing that message, and they resist embracing that message. But should they be able to do so, they then can become independent of the life script that was written for them in their game-playing families.
So a part of the theory says that we live what are called scripts, which is we replay events from our childhood that were unresolved traumas in a way of trying to elicit a different resolution.
Right.
And so when we talk about...
keep doing what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten.
Right.
Yeah.
But if a woman marries a man and he turns out to be an alcoholic and she divorces him and then she marries another man,
9 times out of 10, she'll marry another alcoholic.
Right.
And swear that she never saw it.
Never saw it.
He wasn't drinking. He didn't even drink when I was dating.
Right. Which just shows that there are 1,000, 10,000, 1 million different unconscious unspoken ways that we communicate. So there's very little of human communication that is in the words that we speak to each other.
7%.
Yeah, there's the overwhelming majority, 93%, comes from what we call nonverbal behavior.
Right. Absolutely.
And so for me, what I really like about Burns' theory is the way in which he looks at the representation of the communication patterns. So he takes the id, the ego, and the superego. And so if you imagine, and I'll put a link to a picture of this in the show notes, but if you imagine the id, the ego, and the superego with circles around them, so those are entities.
Right.
And then you have next to that the child, adult, and parent. What Burns said is that when we are communicating with each other, as long as we're communicating from like parts of our psyche, then that's a complementary communication.
So he says we each have those three identified roles.
Yeah.
I have within me a parent, an adult, and a child.
Yeah.
And you have within you a parent, an adult, and a child. And if those roles are communicating on the same wavelength, if my adult is talking to your adult, hey, here's a bill, we need to pay it, I've got this much money, you've got that much money, what if I did this, what if I did that, we negotiate. That's adult talking to adult. If you have a child talking to a child, like, well, I really shouldn't be spending my money on this, but I want dessert. Okay, I want dessert too, and so we both get dessert. That's still a straight transaction.
Right.
It's when you have a crossed transaction that things go awry. So if your child says to me, to my adult, hey, I want to have dessert, and my adult says, I don't think that's a good idea because I don't have the money to pay for it, or we don't have the caloric allotment in our diet, or whatever, then we have a cross transaction. So then you may jump from child to adult to parent in response to my adult. I may fall back into a child and or whatever. I mean, we fly up and down all three of those ranges constantly in an effort to match links.
Right.
But you're chasing somebody that won't match. So if I become a child, then you become the parent and say, oh, stop being childish. You're always trying to tell me what to do.
So let's take our break, and then we'll come back, and I'm going to talk more about that.
All right.
Hey, Brett, if you were going to tell somebody to check out something on the internet to help them with their mental health, what would you tell them?
I'd tell them, listen to Psych with Mike.
Why would you tell them that?
Because it's probably one of the most easily listenable experiences you can have that will give you information that's useful for a whole spectrum of concerns that people have.
I agree, and I have actually been told that by at least a dozen people, several of whom were not married to me, and some of them didn't even know me.
That's amazing.
That is amazing. It's when we get that kind of feedback from people, it is so incredibly humbling and overwhelming for me.
It is for both of us.
Yeah. So we really appreciate it, and as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike. Okay, we're back, and I have actually a story about that. I was doing family therapy at the treatment center where I worked at in St. Louis when I was younger, and I was doing a group, and I was doing it on transactional analysis. And so I had this gal who was clearly having a really, really difficult time. And finally at the end of or not the end, but somewhere in the middle of the group, she slammed her head down on the table and said, "Damn it." Now, obviously, slamming your hand on the table gets people's attention. When you scream, "Damn it," even more people are paying attention to you. And she said, I'm not even joking, she said, "You're really smart, but none of this is helping me." And I said, "Okay, so tell me more about that." And she said, "Well, here's the thing. I live with my son. He's 23 years old. He didn't finish high school. He's not going to college. He won't get a job. And all he does is lay around on the couch and eat food out of my refrigerator. And that's what I'm going to go home to. So how am I not going to drink tonight?" Yeah. And I said, "Okay, so that clearly is a problem." And so we kind of workshopped
what I hear
this.
you saying is.
Yeah. Well, we workshopped it, and I said to the group, "Okay, so you guys hear, Mary saying that she's having this issue. What would you guys want to say to her?" And obviously the overwhelming majority of people said, "Well, you should probably ask him to leave. I mean, he's an adult. If he wants to live on the street, then that's his own choice. But why should you have to pay for him to do nothing?" But she couldn't do that. She couldn't kick him out, right? Because our guilt and shame forces us to continue to engage in the gain, even when we know that it would be better for us not to.
So there's another book that I regularly used as a source of information for this concept. It was written by Marcia Utane, and it was called Scream Louder. And chapter 7 of that book, which is also, I think, currently out of print, but you can get it. Chapter 7 talks about the drama triangle, and it lays out the 14 steps that families follow when they live by the drama triangle, and how these arguments just repeat and never go anywhere, and nothing ever changes.
And the drama triangle was devised by a guy named Kaufman, Kaufman. So you can, I think it's Mann.
You can start back to the original source if you want
Well,
to.
I mean, but you can either look in Scream Louder, but that is out of print, or you can just Google Kaufman Drama Triangle, and you'll be able to get that tons of information about that. And so that's what we were talking about, was that you can move around the drama triangle because of your guilt and shame. But I said, so what I want you to do is to go home today. Your son's going to be laying on the couch, right? She said, yeah. I said, and just say to him, tomorrow while I'm in treatment, I want you to mow the grass. And come back the next day and let us know what happened. And so she goes home and she says this, and so when she comes back and we said, okay, so did he cut the grass? And she said, well, of course not, he didn't cut the grass. And we said, so what happened? And she said, well, he tried to cut the grass, and he started the lawnmower, and but by now the grass is like waist high, and so he cut one swath and the lawnmower died because there's too much grass clogging it up. And so he just left the lawnmower there and came inside. And so she came home and she said to him, why didn't you cut the grass? So that's an adult to adult conversation. Why didn't you cut the grass? He says, Mom, you don't get it. My life is hard, right? Now that's a child to parent response. So that's a cross communication. So now Mary has the choice of either continuing to push the adult to adult conversation or giving in and responding to him like a parent. But if she responds like a parent, Now she's absolved her son of taking any responsibility because she's perceived as the critical parent who won't ever cut him a break. And that's what we do, is that we let people bait us into these responses that give them permission to see themselves as justified in their behavior, and we don't even realize we're giving away our power.
Yeah. So what the drama triangle suggests and what Byrne suggests are quit playing the role.
Yeah.
Just quit playing the role. Don't give them the expected response, because they're set up. It's like lobbing a softball or a watermelon up to a batter and letting them drive it out of the park. Don't throw the damn ball. Then what are they going to do? Then they have to do something different. And I can't control what you do,
right,
but I can control what I do. So if I stop playing, you have to do something else. But so we begin to get movement. There are opportunities for modification at that point.
But the rules of the drama triangle state that anybody who changes the rules of engagement will always be perceived as the persecutor. So the drama triangle is a triangle. It's drawn on one of its vertices. There are three positions that you can play: the victim, the rescuer, or the persecutor.
Right.
And anybody who refuses to play is always seen as the bad guy.
By the other players.
By the other players,
Yeah.
right.
Right.
But you have to understand that, and you have to be willing to accept that.
You have to know everybody that plays is going to say you're the bad guy.
Right.
And you have to give yourself permission to be okay with that.
Exactly.
Can you do that?
And
Because if you can't, then you'll just start playing the game again.
Exactly. And you know, in therapy, we can say, hey, you're not the bad guy.
Right.
You're the one who's pushing this system towards more health. And the system is trying to drag its feet because the system doesn't want to change.
Yeah.
But you're actually the good guy, even if these people are perceiving you as the bad guy. But you have to stand your ground. You have to be willing to hear those slings and arrows being flung against you. And you have to be willing to stand fast, because if you give in, then the only thing that you're teaching the rest of the system is that they have the power and control.
Right.
And that's really hard for people.
Yeah.
People don't know how to allow themselves.
Well, and the fear of the unknown. If I stop playing the game
Which
with
is a
my
great
family,
point.
which is
Right.
a sick and dysfunctional family, then nobody in the family will have anything to do with me.
Yeah.
And they say, well, okay, is it important enough to be in this group that you allow them to abuse you if you keep playing the game? Well, no. I said, well, it must be, because you continue to go back and play the game. Well, but that's the only way they'll play. Yeah, but if you don't play, then they'll say bad things to you or about you, but they will interact differently than they have done before. But what they'll do is raise the price. They'll scream, they'll yell, they'll offer physical violence, they'll do whatever, and you have to be able to resist it. You have to be able to say, I'm sorry, guys, I'm not playing.
Right.
I'm not going to do what it is you want me to do. I'm not going to sit down and have a drink with you. I'm not going to drink. So you can call me bad names, you can make fun of me, you can say I'm not welcome here. Well, all that's fine, I understand, but I'm not going to have a drink. At the end of the day, whatever happens, I'm not going to have a drink. That's how you have to be.
And you're so right about the piece about the unknown. I tell people all the time, the pain of the known is always preferable to the fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
No matter what the pain is and no matter what the unknown is. But people are really reluctant to process. I find it difficult for my clients to even entertain that idea because it causes them too much cognitive dissonance, right? I don't want this pain, but I also don't want to
I don't want any
face
pain.
the unknown.
Yeah, right.
And so when you put somebody in a position to have to resolve that, it's really, really uncomfortable. And, you know, the truth is, what I'm trying to push my clients towards is just making a choice and living with the consequences. If you choose the pain, I'm okay with that. It's not my life. I'm not here to tell you how you should live.
So one of the ways,
but then I want you to accept it.
One of the ways that I try to explain that to people is through the use of language. And we talk about the difference between the concept of responsibility, I-B-I-L-I-T-Y, and responsibility, A-B-I-L. So if I am responsible, it's my fault. If I am responsible, I have the power to choose. I can choose whatever I choose to do. And so if I can take responsibility and internalize it, then I'm free to choose. And I know whatever my choice is, it costs something. Every choice I make costs and pays. So if I stand up to my family and say, guys, I'm not serving alcohol Thanksgiving, not coming. If you come over for dinner, I hope you do. We'll have dinner. We'll have a great dinner. We'll have dessert. We won't have any alcohol. And if you bring it, I'm going to ask you to leave it in the car. Don't bring alcohol in my house. Well, then they're going to say, oh, you ruined Thanksgiving. You're a terrible person. I can't believe you said that. You know Uncle Johnny's sick, whatever. And you have to be able to say, it's the way it is. At my house, no alcohol. And not saying anything about your house. If we come to your house, you do whatever you want to do. I won't drink, but it's your house. You get to make that call. But at my house, no alcohol. You've got to be able to get to that place where you have the freedom to choose and make your choice. But know there's a price.
Right. And just like with Mary, and here's the thing is that for Mary, what became clear was that she actually didn't want her son to get better.
Yeah.
And the reason is because, he would push her and push her and push her. And then, on Friday night, she'd draw a warm bath and pour herself a glass of sherry, which I can't even understand. When I drank, I didn't drink sherry. But that's what she did. And then she would tell herself the reason that she was doing it was because her life was so hard. She couldn't stand it.
That's what they teach you in AA. If you have a family that's together because of the addiction, if one of them stops being addicted, then and they're doing better, somebody else will get sick. Somebody else will develop not necessarily that addiction, but something else, so that the roles that they all know how to play don't have to change.
Because systems...
So you become the identified victim.
Yeah. So from systems theory, what we know is that systems want to maintain balance, and that's called homeostasis. And even in fluid dynamics, if you have a system that is broken and pressure is building up behind a valve and you replace the valve, the system maintains that homeostasis for a short period of time, even after the valve is replaced. It'll still have higher pressure. Right. And we can't explain that, but it's a phenomenon that happens, and it's because systems tend to seek balance, and once that balance is established, the system is very resistant to change.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so if you want to change a system, then you have to see yourself as the most psychologically flexible piece of that system, which means that more of the responsibility of change falls on your shoulders, whether you want it or not. So if you don't want to accept that, then don't complain about wanting change.
Yeah. You can say, oh, this really sucks. And it really does. But you still have to continue to do it.
Exactly.
Whatever the goal was.
That's right.
Right.
And, I tell my clients, regardless of how young they are, because some of my adolescent clients are the most psychologically flexible people in their system. And I tell them, regardless of who they are, anybody who's pushing for change, I say the only way that you can effect change in any system is to be the most psychologically flexible component of that system.
Right.
And then you have to accept the responsibility for change, even when it's hard, even when there is resistance. You can't complain about that. You have to recognize that that is a part of the process. But if you can remain steadfast, you can effect change. And just imagine what that would be like.
But you can't guarantee the direction of the change.
Exactly, no.
You can just change and make change happen. And that's important to point out. We can't guarantee, and a lot of times people come in therapy and they want to talk about why does somebody else behave the way they do? And you have to get them out of that. You have to say, this is not what we're here for. Why do you do what you do? Well, I do that because he does that. Well, okay. So what if you do something different? Well, he still does that. Well, not necessarily true. Let's find out. What are you willing to do that's different? Nothing. Okay, then nothing's changing.
Right.
So you got to get them to nibble at the idea that they have the power to make something change, but they don't have the control over what the outcome of the change is.
Yeah. And that reminds me of an old Chinese proverb, and I don't remember all of it, but my son fell off his horse and he broke his leg, and everybody says, oh, that's so horrible. Yeah, but then the marshals came to draft people for the army, and because he had a broken leg, he didn't have to serve. Oh, well, that's a great thing. Yeah, except that then they pillaged our fields and we had a famine. Oh, well, that's a horrible thing. And it goes back and forth like that. Have you heard that?
No.
Okay.
But I don't know a lot of old Chinese proverbs.
And I wish I could, that I knew its conclusion, but the point of it is...
I wish you did, too. Why'd you waste all this time?
Well, because I have come to rely on you to be
To
an
come up
all-knowing
with.
oracle. But the point of it is that it goes back and forth
You're going to have to change that expectation.
between the positive and the negative, and in the end, it just is life.
Yeah.
You know, there are positive and negative things about almost anything that happens to us. And the way that we view the positivity and the negativity is really mostly dependent on what our perception is.
Yeah.
And so if we can choose to remain positive in the way that we see our plight, then most of the time we're going to have good things happen to us.
Yeah.
And if we only see the negative, then the opposite's going to be true. So that's in the power of the person. So hopefully that was beneficial for you guys, and you got something out of that. As always, the music that appears in Psych with Mike is written and performed by Mr. Benjamin DeClue. We would love it if you would go on the internet. You can get us on Facebook at Psych with Mike. You can find us on TikTok, Psych with Mike. You can find us on the internet at psychwithmike.com. And as always, if you would go to Apple Podcasts and find us, Psych with Mike, on Apple Podcasts, and leave us a rating and subscribe to the show, that would be fantastic. And as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.